I joined just to learn something. Like the rest of you, I have obviously been part of designing the system, but it's very nice to, I've never seen us training how to use it. And my sense is that I think for most of us, it is a very logical way of progressing and start putting programming into formats. Because I think for many of you, you can see that this way here, we can package pipeline in ways we could not do that earlier. And also it allows us to work digitally in a much more systemic and systematic way. And my hope is that everybody's effort here will translate into actually a more effective joined up UN. Because the joined up action earlier did not have a common system. So if we had joint projects, we had to revert to paper or simple systems. And very often we had to revert to spreadsheets and then put things back in the agency systems, as it were. At least now we have a joint system. And then finally, I hope this system will be used for all pool financing as we go forward. And there are $100 million in pool financing. So by, in a sense, going and using the system now, and we can also elaborate, co-develop, and integrate with other systems.
Thank you so much for waiting. This, as I said, is the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Fund, and we're using the MPTFO's platform for launching the concept note. Some of you who participated in our first call would have noticed that we did use a paper-based system for the first call, but with the second call, we felt that I think that is enough, and we are the first fund using this platform. So you will see a few things that will be improved based on your feedback, but also you will soon see other funds using this platform because, as you know, MPTFO hosts over hundreds of funds that use them as their administrative agents. So it is giving you an early access as an early adopter of the new system. So we're excited that we're also able to do that. Okay, so the overall, the flow of the presentation is that we'll talk about the different fund roles in the system that have been assigned, and that sort of is very important because that defines what you're able to access and not. Most of the colleagues on this call, I believe, are the RCO focal points, the primary RCO focal points, and their function is extremely important in the system because you're the singular user who can submit the concept notes to the secretariat, to the SG designate once it's completed at your end. So, and we will show the links between the different user roles as well. So it's important to sort of understand the differences, but most people can access, edit, and save the information. There's only one person who can submit, which is the primary RCO focal point. There are different sort of tabs that come together to form the outline of the concept note. The general information tab, the narrative, SDGs, and the documents tabs, and we'll get into each of the details. I'd recommend that you always keep the user guide handy and also share it with your colleagues who you will give access to the system, because that has in great details explained how to enter the information, because again, as I said, MPTFO has built a system for a lot of funds. So there are certain features that the COVID-19 fund is not leveraging at this point, but other funds will. So you will see those features show up, but it's not necessary for you to fill those out. So the user guide is specifically for the COVID-19 fund that we've written. And then of course, finally submit the concept note. We'll show you how that looks. So by now, everybody who is either an RCO focal point, who is an RCO primary focal point would have received an email from the system, from admin SP Online, the left side of my screen, which basically gives you access to a SharePoint site, which is the landing page that sort of introduces the system, but also resources that are available when you're using the system. So it will ask you to log in because it is a Microsoft SharePoint site with a Microsoft 365 account. For most users who are on un.org or one.un.org or anybody who's using the Microsoft 365, you can use your existing Microsoft login account. The only thing I'd point out at this stage is potentially that a lot of our RCO focal point colleagues have a un.org as well as a one.un.org email address. So do pay attention to the email address receiving this email, because that is the account that is associated with the system, not your other accounts. So potentially sometimes you may be logged in from both of your accounts, but the system will just give you an error and not let you proceed if you're not logged in with the account that received the email. So this is where you land up after you log in. This is the SharePoint site. It has the NPTFO platform. Because we're the only fund using it, we do get a little bit of prime real estate. So the user guide that you see here is the COVID-19 user guide that's been posted here. But in times to come, as other funds start using the platform, we'll have a redesign of this page. But for now, for this call purposes, I think what you see is what you'll be seeing for till you submit the concept note. So to access the concept note, you click here, access to the concept note. The NPTFO gateway, the small square, takes you to the website version of the NPTFO gateway, where you can see the inflow, outflows of resources, other relevant documents, guidances that have been uploaded. Because, for example, the COVID-19 fund has uploaded the gender equality marker guidance that has been issued, that also has been referenced in the webinars that was held yesterday and that will be held today as well. So there are some key resources and documents that are sort of official documents that are also available here. We will upload a small video under the trainings and tutorials for you to have access to, but also to share again with your colleagues. And then the user guide is already there. And if any updates are made, we'll keep uploading it to the same spot. Now, the different roles, as I said, in the system are significant to note. As the Secretariat, our primary role is to ensure that the RCO focal points have access to the system, and they can create, and this access is provided through a role that is assigned, which is a concept note applicant, which is what you also see in your email that you received from us. Sorry, yeah, okay. The other thing to recognize is that as the concept note applicant for the RCO focal point, you are the first person who can create what we call the shell, or the general information outline of the concept note. And this is important because this is where you will assign, you'll pick the participating organizations for each of the concept notes. And as you would have already seen in the call letter, there are maximum of 3 concept notes per country that can be submitted, 1 for funding and 2 for pipeline. And the caps, etc., are referenced in the call letter. So I'd recommend that you look at that. So for each of the concept notes, you will create an outline and the general information tab, which will enable access to all your other colleagues. And that is done through what is known as managing the contacts, the focal point contacts information. So a lot of colleagues have alternate RCO focal points that they would like to give access to the system. Some have even requested it for their RCs. Since the RCO focal point is the only one who can submit, there is always going to be just one user who is assigned that role. However, anybody else from the RCO can be assigned a focal point role. The only thing they cannot do is submit, but they can do everything else that the RCO focal point can do, which is that they can enter data and they can enter information into the different tabs. So you can create all your RCO colleagues that are like technical leads, etc., who will be working with you on the concept note as a focal point in the system, just like you would for the participating organizations. And then finally, before 31st of August, we ask that you review the entirety of the concept note, and then you're the only one who will see the submit button on your screen to submit it to the SG designate. The other role, which is of the focal points, is there are, as you know, 4 participating organizations per concept note. So you will have to add colleagues to each concept note separately. You can't add them as a bulk to all concept notes because, as you can understand, the different concept notes will have different sort of focus areas, which would require potentially a different configuration of UNCT members that are part of each of the concept notes. However, for your RCO focal points, if you wish to add them to all the concept notes that you're submitting, you could always do that as well. And the functions that they can perform are save and edit the concept notes. The RCO focal point role, just to summarize, can create and complete the general information tab for each concept note, which will show you the screenshots. Do always keep your user guide handy because, again, there are certain things that we are just highlighting in this presentation, but there are greater details for all the sections that you need to fill out in the user guide. And then, of course, review and submit. So to create the concept note, you would receive from me, since I'm the one assigning you the function in the system, an email that is on the right side, which basically tells you what is the fund that you've been assigned, the role that you've been assigned, which is a concept note applicant, and a link to access that system, and then which takes you to a page like this. Please always make sure that you're in the GMS tab, because even though FMS is visible, you can't really do anything in there. It just gives you sort of the context of the fund as it is, and the different fields that are associated with the fund, but you're not actually able to do anything in there. So please make sure that you click on GMS and then you'll see the button Create Concept Note. Now, the one thing that we'd ask you to do is, we've noticed that some Safari users have had issues connecting to the system. So if you're using your Mac, please use either Firefox or Chrome. But in a Windows PC or a laptop, you should be able to access it on any of the browsers that you're using already. You will have to create, if you decide to submit, if the country teams decide to submit 3 concept notes, you will have to hit this Create Concept Note button 3 times to create 3 concept notes. We do ask you that please pay attention that this is not a test environment. This is the live environment, so we cannot delete concept notes. So only if you are certain that you'd be submitting, that you'd be creating and submitting a concept note, please create the concept note. If it's still in a negotiation state or a decision-making stage, you could look at the system from a user guide perspective, but we recommend that you do not create a concept note if you're not. But I understand most colleagues will at least submit 1 concept note, so so feel free to create that. The only thing that you can't change, we'll come into that, is the contacts information once it's been created, because the contacts go into a database and then they become that. So just make sure that you use the right email address that you would want to be associated and the fields that you need filled out when you're creating contacts. So you hit the Create Concept Note button. Again, please use the user guide, because that's very detailed. So this is the pre-populated sort of some sections that show up for you when you create the concept note. There is the general information tab, which is sort of the starting point, the shell or the outline of the concept note. What you see here is a certain sort of nomenclature that comes from the fund. For the title, we do ask you to use the naming convention either for funding or for pipeline, and then colon the title of the concept note, because then that'll allow you as well as all your other colleagues to be able to see which concept note to look at if you're looking at the one that is for funding or for the ones that are for pipeline. So we do ask that you put that right up in the title. The anticipated start date, the duration in months. We've noticed that because the concept notes are now sort of anchored in the SERPs, the finalized SERPs, we've noticed that the duration of the projects that have been pointed out in the SERPs are of varying lengths. So the only thing we ask is that for this call to, all implementation needs to be completed by December 31st, 2021. So we'd appreciate if the duration of the months is less than that. Otherwise, the system will also give you a prompt if it goes longer than because I'm sure you know the fund is still April 2022. So in any case, you can't have implementation longer than the lifespan of the fund. And once you enter the number of months, the anticipated end date gets calculated automatically in the system. And this is the brief overview section where you can give sort of the executive summary or sort of key aspects that make this concept note an evidence-based as well as the right priority for the country to request either funding for or to submit for pipeline. And then when you hit save, what will happen is right in this general information tab, a new section opens up. So we'd ask you to hit save so that you could see the other sections. There is going to be a comments box that will open up as well for you, and you'll see this comment box across the other tabs as well. We ask you not to fill this up because we will use this once you submit the concept notes. We will use this to document the reviewer's feedback on the concept note. So while developing the concept note, because it is in draft mode and it is not been submitted, it is your local sort of document, which is just online in a system. what you could use the space for is to communicate with your colleagues if there are any things. But just before you hit submit, we ask that you please remove all the comments, just so that we have that available for the reviewers. Then the other sections that open up when you hit that save is geographical scope, which is pretty straightforward. You don't have to enter the name of the region. It appears twice. The regions is where you pull up from a drop-down list the region, and the country associated with that region then open up on the other side. The participating organizations for each concept node potentially will be different. So this is where we ask you to list the participating organizations. The implementing partners is where you can list your government departments and ministries that you're working with, your civil society organizations, etc. And it's an open text box, so you can freeform write it. The participating organization is a dropdown. The NGOs, it shows up here, but it's been disabled for our fund right now because we're not using that drop-down option. The other and the most important thing is the contacts, because as you would see, so for example, Christina created this demo concept note in the system. And so by default, since she was assigned the role of a concept note applicant, she becomes the project manager for that concept note. But here she can manage all her contacts. So for example, your alternate RCO focal points can be added here. Even your RC can be added here through the manage contacts. Manage contacts has an entire contact sort of database fields. They're not all mandatory, but we do ask you to fill 5 fields, which is the email address, the first name, last name, the region, and the country where this contact is functioning from. So we would want you to enter those and then hit save, and that contact then shows up in that particular concept note. And you can hit a notify button, and the system will then generate another email to them if you feel that they may not have seen that initial email when you create them in the system. Then there are a few other fields, so the universal markers and the fund-specific markers. As I said, this fund is using some of the functionalities that the MPTFO has built. So we're not using the OECD DAC, but there are 2 mandatory markers, the gender equality marker and the risk. Again, the guidances for the gender equality marker, which are also being referenced in the gender equality programming webinars, are all hyperlinked from the user guide. So please feel free to use those. And then, of course, we do ask you to fill up this. The system, again, will not allow you to save it if you have left any of the mandatory fields blank. But OECD DAC is not mandatory, so you could leave it blank. Then the fund-specific markers, we have 4 of them. There are 3 fund windows. They're referenced in our terms of reference as well. We do ask that you select a primary fund window because, as you can imagine, we understand that some interventions will be cross-cutting across multiple windows, but we do ask you to pick a primary, and even though there are activities that may sort of spill over into other windows, but we do ask that you pick one. The human rights-based approach is also a priority for the concept note development process. So we've, in the user guide, hyperlinked the most recent guidance issued by the Interagency Working Group on Human Rights-Based Approaches, and we do ask you to fill this up and also reference the guidance when you're developing your concept note. The primary socioeconomic pillar, we are asking you to pick one primary socioeconomic pillar. So you'll see the 5 listed there, and we recognize that this is not a one-to-one relationship, but we do ask you to still select one. Concept note type, again, just like in the title, I had asked you to use a naming convention. Actually, this is just another way to make sure that we're certain that this concept note is for funding or pipeline. So this is a mandatory marker for the fund as well, just to make sure that we can run reports on the other end and use this information. And then the last information that we're asking, again, you'll notice that it's very different from the full project budget and also the full project questions, et cetera, because this is a concept note. And we recognize that, you know, using the UNCT's time to build out this concept note versus a project is important to minimize, because as the fund is only capitalized for $20 million, we don't want you to be writing full-blown proposals if you're not going to be funded. So that's why the concept note is an important way for you to demonstrate that this concept note deserves funding and has all the elements that would make it a strong UN development system offering for that country. In the budget, we do ask you to indicate the budget that is requested of the UN COVID MPTF, but in other sources, you could indicate repurposed resources, IFI contributions, and other resources that would enable supporting the implementation of this program. And then you hit save, and this is where you've basically created the general information tab. And this will allow then for your colleagues that you would have added as focal points from the UNCT organization, participating organizations who are members to this concept note, to actually log in and start entering the other sections.
We continue the presentation with the introduction of the part where both the RC focal point, but also the participating organization who are invited to collaborate the section that need to be completed. In this particular case, you will see that the system, as Pio was anticipating before, has to be finalized when all the narrative is going to be completed, the SDG target, goals and target are be selected, and then in case in support to the concept note that is presented, even relevant documents are uploaded. In this case, both roles will be able to collaborate to the same platform. In particular, particular attention needs to be given to the narrative section. As we were hearing before, can we work in Word and then put in information in our platform? Definitely yes. The narrative section is designed at the fund level, and it mirrors a little bit what you have as a support document in Word for the concept note. So the section, they highlight in the title what are the questions you are asked to respond, and how. So the what and the how are indicated in the title section, and to facilitate also the navigation, when you hover around this title section, there is a detail of what you need to do in the narrative, in the dedicated narrative section. If you can see here, this text box is a, so to speak, limited rich format text. So you can bold, make it italic, create links and number in sequence or bullet points or very simple matrix. But I mean, somehow as you know, the plain text is what gets into there. So the important point that Pio also highlight before, if you have relevant hyperlink that are important for this particular section, this is an efficient and effective way on where to create this reference. Same as for the general information tab, the comment section is mostly dedicated to the reviewer. So we are asked not to use, or anyway not to submit with the comment section included. And then when you hit save, basically your content, your narrative content is validated. If you can see here at the bottom in red, there is a limitation character number that was decided at the fund level based on the experience of the call one. However, if by any chance there is a need to a more extensive more extensive narrative on an exceptional basis, please feel free to reach out at the help desk and we see how can we accommodate this extension. Another feature that is, I think, useful and important in this section is the entry point to the Document Management Center. So if you can see here, basically you can enter the document that maybe they can support your narrative text straight from this narrative section, and they will be linked to the narrative when you will review your document management system. So bottom line, if you have a complicated matrix but that you feel it gives additional value to the narrative that you are preparing, feel free to upload it here and make it as a reference in the abstract, so you can make sure that the reviewer can link what is the document that is uploaded in this section, and to complement the information that was included there. As Pio was saying before, this platform is meant to be collaborative. So basically people can work together on the platform. What it doesn't happen is a simultaneous data entry point. So we included in the platform a warning to pay attention of the section and how, the timing of when this section is was last saved. So they're going to be all the time the name of the last person who worked on this section and the timing. So we make sure that no content is lost. When you hit save is validated, and as it's written as a warning, this should be done per each narrative box to make sure that the narrative is saved is saved in a proper way. Another warning that is actually automatically created by the system, if the section are not completed, basically the system prompts you with an alert by saying please save before leaving the section. So in this case you have a reminder to make sure that all your content is saved. This section is to select the SDG. It's pretty straightforward. The library is already created at the fund level and is broken down in main goal, secondary goal, and contributing goal. As the Secretariat included this breakdown from at the fund level, and the only request is at least one of the SDG should be selected. I'm saying that it's pretty straightforward because given that the structure is created in the back end, you will only be prompted to open the menu of this specific goal that is contributing to your your call for proposal, and then you'll be asked to automatically select the dedicated target. When you hit save, your SDG targets are validated, and then they will be summarized, so to speak. It's like this menu will be closed, and you have the summary of the SDG goal related to this particular concept note. Just to complete the final section, so to speak, is the reference to the document management system. Is a repository where you will upload the document that you consider are important to give a definition and other important information that may not be entered in the narrative. And the system to upload is pretty easy. So you upload the document, you browse in your local drive, you indicate the abstract, and then in order to make sure that you can recognize your document, and when you hit the upload, you have successful results. So you make sure that all the documents that you upload are in the list. And anyway, you have a double check because you will find then a table where the document with their title, their type, the source, because in case if from the narrative is going to be indicated here, your abstract and who does what and when. So this concludes the presentation of the 4 tabs that are the core of the concept note. So we created this page of reference and quick links that you will find soon also in the SharePoint landing page. And this is a bullet point of the conversation we had this morning. So you can directly access to the landing page where you have the entry point to the create contact, concept note. The user guide, as Pio was saying, is at the moment only for the COVID-19 and PTF, so you don't need to browse anywhere, then you just click the link. And then the user guide link directly, which is going to be updated systematically while we see maybe some useful tips that can be useful for you while you're entering your information. Then the reference are going to be the UN site and the MPTF office site of the UN COVID-19 Response and Recovery Trust Fund. And then we created 2 different contacts, one very, very technical, and there are couple of tips that I was following while we were having the conversation. If there is, for instance, you're entering a contact and you need an adjustment, feel free to reach out. We can fix this one, as well as what Pio was saying before, is the real game. But if it happens that you create a concept note and you realize it was by mistake or whatever, feel free to connect, and we will make sure that we can give provide the dedicated support. And then for any other question related to this particular call for proposal, there is also the call to that where you can ask both programmatic aspect and also if you have tips, because as a team you're working on the same platform, it can be a useful place where also to post your your experience or feedback. And then feel free to reach out. We will try to work on a FAQ soon, and possibly we will put in the landing page as well, so people have one hub where all the information are organized in a systematic manner. And with that, I think we have concluded our presentation.